So we have the next speaker in line. So we have Kaif Ahsan. Kaif is a coder by passion and a hacker by profession. He started his journey in tech as a software engineer, but soon fell in love with the art of breaking software. His knowledge of development and cybersecurity has naturally led him to application security space, where he currently is working as a product security engineer at Atlassian. Kaif is a big proponent of education and open access to knowledge. He regularly volunteers to run cybersecurity workshops at various universities, giving talks at local meetups and conferences as well. He is also the co-host for the amazing YouTube channel Everything Cyber, where he shares hands-on and conversational videos on tech and cybersecurity. His videos target intermediate level professionals and help them to gain expertise through practical content. Um, Today's talk for Kaif is based on securing our software supply chains using SLSA framework. Welcome to DevSecCon, Kaif, and
Hello. Thanks,
Welcome to the
Kavika.
show, Kaif. Thank you for joining us. I'm particularly interested in this because I'm very interested in all things supply chain security, even though it is a buzzword. So, and I'm really interested for this particular one. So, what we'll do is we'll add your slides over here, and Kavika and I will go off to the background. I also did want to take this opportunity just to thank Kavika, so she will be heading off. We will have another co-host joining us. But thank you so much for co-hosting and kicking off DevSecCon 2022 with us. And Kaif, I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Kavika, for hosting. And I think you did a much better introduction for myself than I ever could. So thanks for that as well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk on securing the software supply chain using the SLSA framework. I think Kavika already has given a pretty good introduction on myself, so I'll not spend any more time on this slide and get started with the talk directly. So let's try to understand what today's agenda is about. We'll first try to understand the landscape where a framework like SLSA is required, and then give a quick introduction to SLSA, understand what value it brings, and lastly, what does SLSA not cover? Cool. Let us understand the landscape. And I'd like to do that with sharing two of my favorite memes. The first one being us coming from a software engineering background. It's safe to say that it's just not just me. A large portion of us also rely heavily on outsourcing our sort of work from Stack Overflow and a lot of other places. And that's actually the beauty of it as well. Like very few other industries are as open and collaborative as IT. Taking it up a notch, and we're so confident in these kind of projects in open source that many of our large-scale enterprise softwares, which are used by millions if not billions of people, often rely on small open source projects, which also brings us to the other side of the coin, that supply chain attacks has been one of the biggest considerations and issues in cybersecurity, because in software so far we really haven't put in a much thought on how does these components have been produced, are they safe to use and whatnot. And that led to various attacks like the Log4j, Kaseya, SolarWinds, and much more. And it's not just the vulnerability in third-party libraries that are causing so much pain in the supply chain. We've seen visibility of what we're using and how is a big issue. For folks who were involved in the Log4j incident, we had to scramble a lot to figure out that, hey, which of our products and repositories do use Log4j, and figuring that out was hard. Similarly, the integrity or figuring out whether our software has been tampered or not is a big issue. And it's just not our software that we put in front of the users. The software that we are getting from open source from different vendors, is that say secure as well, is a big question. And lastly, the remediation. Even if we know that something is broken, how quickly can we replace it from our supply chain? And oftentimes that period is long enough for attackers to compromise us. And all of these issues are quite complex on their own, and they deserve their own lightning talks, and if not, in-depth talks, if I'm honest. In my talk, I'll focus explicitly on the integrity side of things, because ensuring that our software has not been tampered with is a big challenge. Let's look at the typical software development lifecycle. On one end, we have the developer creating the source, which then gets built and then packaged up for the users to consume it. And throughout this phase, there are lots of areas where tampering can happen. All these attack vectors make secure software development very, very hard, because is the build we created secure? Has it been tampered? Is the software we're giving to our clients and customers, has the attacker managed to slip in or do something with it? Figuring out all these things is very, very difficult, and that's why we've been seeing so many large scale attacks. Attacks like SolarWinds is a big example, where the build platform was compromised, and it was a very, very complicated and complex attack. So how do we ensure integrity of our software? How do we make sure that no one has tampered with it? And that's where the SLSA framework comes in. The SLSA, or SLSA, stands for Supply Chain Levels for Software Artifacts, and affectionately called as SLSA. It is basically a checklist of standards and controls that prevent tampering from happening in our supply chain. And it's just not just a big list that we need to follow. It actually is like a roadmap that people can gradually use to secure their supply chain. And the best part is probably it's vendor neutral, and it's an industry collaborative framework that is led by the OpenSSF Foundation, which is backed by huge organizations like Google, Microsoft, Atlassian, and many other. So let's look at some use cases of SLSA. And the first one is obviously for organizations who want to make sure that their software hasn't been tampered with. And it's not just one size that everyone needs to conform. All the organizations can use SLSA according to their needs to um, achieve supply chain security and following the different SLSA levels. We'll look at them in a second. And zooming into that organization security, organizations can use SLSA to securely consume open source software. And it's not just open source software. It's also the software we're getting from our vendors and our third parties and other places. We can use SLSA to ensure that the software they created and the software we are using are actually the same one, and nothing has been tampered with. So how does SLSA actually does that? To understand that, we need to be aware of a few basic terminologies. Now, these terminologies are going to be used a lot throughout this presentation, as well as when you explore SLSA by yourself, you'll come across them quite a bit. So it's quite important that we cover them. The first two major ones I'm going to cover are two big words: provenance and attestation. So what do they even mean? Provenance is basically some verifiable information that helps us understand whether a piece of software has been tampered or not. So it is information like where, when, and how something was produced. That's basically it. And the other word is attestation. Think of attestation like a certificate, an automated way provenance can be verified. So oftentimes it is machine readable metadata about different stages of the software development lifecycle and different stages of that software. And using that certificate, we can show that the authenticity. For example, when the software, after it is built and before it is packaged, attestation can be like a certificate where we can go like, is this software secure and hasn't been tampered with? If not, then we continue using it. The other two ones I want to cover is artifacts and SDLC. Artifacts is basically a general way of saying that this is a piece of data. It can be anything like a file, a commit, or even a container image. And then lastly, something I'm going to use a lot is SDLC, which is just an acronym for Software Development Lifecycle. But in case anyone is not familiar with it, I thought I'll just give a heads up. So going back to the question, how does SLSA ensure integrity? It does it by two basic pillars, which I like to view it, as I like to view it. The first one is attestation. The other one is hardening. So remember the problem that throughout our software development lifecycle, we had no way to communicate that, hey, or check that, hey, has this piece of software been tampered? Has some malicious actor been has made it compromised? So attestation using SLSA and the things the checklist it provides to give attestation throughout that software development lifecycle, you can basically check that whether something has been tampered or not. So throughout that life cycle, it's something some similar to a certificate is generated that can be used to verify the integrity of it. And the SLSA steps prepares your infrastructure for those integrity checks. The other part is the hardening. So we are not just relying on the certificate, but also the SLSA frameworks. If you follow the different steps and the levels, it will help your entire software development environment to be more secure and resilient, especially against tampering. So what again, the two ways SLSA really provides value is that way of certificate generation and attestation, and the other one is hardening the platform itself. And the way you do it is by following the SLSA levels. So again, remember the roadmap we spoke about that, hey, SLSA provides you a roadmap to gradually improve it. And these are the levels that form that roadmap. So in level 1, you have more simple and easily adoptable things to do. And all the way to level 4, things get much more complex to implement. But as you're climbing through the levels and implementing different things in SLSA, you're securing your supply chain more and more. And if we look at all the different things SLSA provides you, this lightning talk will become a full-blown boot camp, honestly. So we won't get to cover every single aspect of it, but we'll see how SLSA provides the protections at different layer by some practical examples. Let's zoom into the source side. So again, this slide is very content heavy. I'm not expecting all of you to read it. You can look these things up in the SLSA's website, slsa.dev, which I'll link after. But this is to show that SLSA provides you with actionable steps that help you climb the levels one by one. And this is for things like source, for your build, your package, and many other things. But what exactly SLSA is trying to achieve here? If I try to distill that previous slide into these high level things, what SLSA is trying to do is establish a change, have a change history, which we can then go and verify and validate. So we can then go see at any point of time if anything has changed, what has changed, who changed, and when. Similarly, for source, which is a lot of the case are the source code, only trusted people can add and update the code. So the higher you climb up in the levels of SLSA, the more authentication and authenticity you need to be able to add and remove code. Similarly, unvetted code cannot reach the users. So if you distill all those steps, it just becomes to these three high level things that SLSA is trying to help you achieve. Similarly, let's have a look what are some of the things SLSA is trying to do with build. Again, it provides us with a lot of actionable items from making our builds scripted and automatic to hardening the build environment by making it more isolated, short-lived, and no internet access and different things. And as you climb up the ranks and the levels, the harder and the stronger your environment becomes. If we again distill those things regarding the build, SLSA is just providing us these three key steps. The first one is automating the build process, so there is less scope of intervention, and someone can manually intervene and put in some malicious stuff and tamper with it. And it's not just the build process. SLSA focuses on the environment as well. So making the environment isolated from the internet, making the environment short-lived, and a few different other tactics, you can really harden the environment where your software is being built and packaged. And it's not just the hardening of the build process and the package. If you follow the SLSA steps and the checklist, it gives you the ability to check your builds throughout that process. What I mean by that is, let's say you have made a build, you can then programmatically or manually check, is this the build that I was supposed to get? Did anyone manage to put in some malicious piece of code or any dependency or anything like that? That can also be achieved. And all these is done via something called the provenance. The provenance allows you to verify all these things by giving you a common language to validate this externally and internally. So what it means is we can tell to our customers that, hey, this is how we are doing SLSA. These are the different steps, and this is actually what we're doing. And it's not just about telling it, they can also verify that the software you have created and the one they have is the same one. And how? That's where when you may achieve the things mentioned in the provenance section allows you to do that. And it's not just for the customers. We can also require SLSA from our vendors. We can ask the vendors to um, for have certain SLSA levels, and they can show us on that they're maintaining it, and we can go and verify it using the provenance rules. So all these are great, but SLSA is not a silver bullet. There are certain things SLSA doesn't cover as well, and I'll cover a couple of things I've talked about so far, which is the source and build. So if you have things like not following the practice of least privilege, or if you have vulnerabilities in your code, SLSA can really help with it. Similarly, if the source control itself, like Git, is compromised, again, that's not something SLSA can help you with. That's an additional thing you need to secure. Similarly, with the build, if your environment, if you're not building from the secure environment and from somewhere else, all this effort you've done, it really becomes again fruitless. Similarly, if build platforms like I don't know, Travis CI or GitHub or Docker or whatever it is has some issues, again, that's something SLSA can't help with. SLSA is more focused on the tampering side and tampering only. Well, that's all I get to cover in a lightning talk. If you want to know SLSA in depth and you want to figure out how to establish that in your company, go to salsa.dev or just Google SLSA framework. You can also check out Guac, which is another framework coming, which pairs up nicely with SLSA. And I'll make one last shameless plug to wrap up my talk. Like Kavika mentioned, I run a YouTube channel with a friend called Everything Cyber, where I create similar long and short form contents like this. So things like hands-on labs, thought experiments, interviews with industry experts, and much more. You can find the social links for that, as well as the links to the slides, both PDF and Canva, in this QR code. Thanks all from me. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Kaif. It was really, I think SLSA is one of those frameworks. I think you did a really good job of like breaking it down in 15 minutes, because I think there is a whole website and a long ass document dedicated to that. So, but I think that was really well done, and
Thank you,
a good mention for Guac as well. I don't know how far they're going to take the whole SLSA and Guac. I think naturals are probably
I love it. I absolutely love it. Like all the namings.
Yeah, at least it's easy to remember, right? Like we love our acronyms in cybersecurity. I do have Proma here joining us as well. So we previously obviously had Kavika co-hosting with me, and now I will have Proma co-hosting the next hour with me. But before anything, just wanted to say thank you for the talk. Kaif, it was lovely having you on DevSecCon. We'll move you to the back screen because we do have the next speaker. The fun thing about lightning talks is, they're quick and fast, and, they come really quickly. But thank you so much for joining us.
Feel free to reach out.